Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazarov Chess channel and welcome back to the FIDE World Cup in 2023 that's going on now in Azerbaijan in Baku. So we're now in the quarterfinal stage of this amazing chess event and we're starting now the quarterfinals with the most spectacular battle between Gukesh and Magnus Carlsen. So we have to also mention in the quarterfinals 4 Indian players are competing still in the event, which is really crazy. Half of this quarterfinals are Indian players. India has become now really the biggest and the strongest chess country for sure. Vidit Santosh Gurati, Arjun Ergaisi and Pragnananda still are in the event. As I said, Gukesh is competing and against the strongest player Magnus Carlsen today. So in my opinion, really spectacular games we'll see in the quarterfinal stage, but of course also in the continuation of the FIDE World Cup in 2023. So let's see now what happened in the first classical game between Gukesh and Magnus Carlsen. The game finished a couple of minutes ago. Really crazy game it was for sure. So with the white pieces, Gukesh opened with the move d4. Magnus' response was knight to f6. We have bishop to f4, the London system. Very interesting idea here by Gukesh already. We have b6. Magnus goes into these lines where he's trying to compete for the e4 square. We have knight to c3, bishop to b7 immediately. So we see black has a great grip around the square e4. We have now f3, so that's why Gukesh is battling for the square, prepares e4 himself, and Magnus competes now with this idea, e6, preparing of course also bishop to b4 to attack the knight that is controlling the e4 square, and then of course hit the center with the move d5. So basically the game from the beginning is simply a battle for 2 squares, for the d5 square but also for the e4 square. So we have e4 immediately by Gukesh. Magnus prevents knight to b5 with the move a6. We have queen to d2. Gukesh is preparing now queenside castling. Magnus goes d5 immediately. Queenside castling, bishop to b4. So you see there is now a huge tension here in the center of the board. Everything is coordinated. Everything is really spectacular already in the center of the board. And now after move bishop to b4, Gukesh has basically 2 choices. He can play aggressively with the move a3, kicking away the bishop, or he could have played also the move e5. He decided to play a3. e5 is also very interesting because after knight to d7, then bishop to g5 leads into very complicated and spectacular line. Then something like, I don't know, bishop to c3 would happen, deflecting the queen maybe from the defense of the bishop. White has to take out now with the pawn, and then f6. Very risky for both sides. Look at this. E takes f6, g takes f6 leads into a weakened pawn structure here also for white, but also leads into weakened pawn structures here for black. So it would be really a dangerous game where both kings would be exposed. So that's why here after move bishop to b4 by Magnus, Gukesh went into this more solid line, I think, with the move a3 after bishop to c3, queen to c3. Now, okay, there is maybe a huge tension here around the square e4 still, but here Gukesh has also clear target with the weak pawn on c7. Magnus goes with d takes e4 immediately, hits now the center. If you play bishop to c7 here, this wasn't played by Gukesh. It seems tempting, but actually this wouldn't be good, I think, anymore for black. After something like queen to d5, we get out of the attack. You can maybe even pick up another pawn, but that's not the issue. The issue is that after kingside castling, I think here by Magnus, here look at this. You can maybe even attack the queen further. It doesn't matter. Look at this, queen to c6, and now after a couple more moves, I think in this types of position where both kings would be on opposite sides, black's attack would be much faster. So that's why I think Gukesh didn't want to go into this particular line. After rook to c8, notice many pieces are lined up now on the c file. I'm just telling you, of course, one particular line. Of course, white doesn't have to play the game like this, but this is really one of the optimal suggested lines by the Stockfish. And look at that, I wouldn't really not feel comfortable anymore here with the white pieces, especially because of the c-file attack. You can maybe try, I don't know, to take out here the pawn, but now with knight to e4, the queen gets endangered. Pawn on g2 is weak, c-file attack is work. Maybe we can also include the rook on the b-file. So in my opinion, it would be simply a one-way ticket, or where white would simply have to defend the position. So that's why after move d takes e4, here we have d5 by Gukesh. Gukesh breaks and enters here in the center of the board. Really spectacular move by Gukesh immediately. After move d5, here Magnus went with knight to d5. If you play e takes d5 here, then maybe again this whole concept with bishop to c7 could work, because now the queen could be endangered. Now you don't have anymore the square d5 that we have seen previously when we attack the queen, that the queen could retreat to d5. Now this square is taken by your own pawn, and it's a different story now, because of queen to e7, bishop to b6, you cannot even castle because you get bishop to c5. That's the issue here. So it's a little bit different now. Actually, I think black could get this piece is very, very active. So it would be a good now continuation here for black. So after move d5 here, knight to d5 was played by Magnus. Now Gukesh takes out now the pawn on b7. We have a queen to f6. Magnus forces the trades of queens and goes into an equal endgame, I think here. Magnus wants, I think here, to play a really solid game. Nothing spectacular is going on the board. There is simply still this tension around the square e4, but basically there is now this rule: to take is a mistake. Who takes makes actually a mistake, because if you play f takes e4, then the knight is coming, or maybe the bishop is coming actively into the game. The same thing happens if you take from black's perspective. If you take on f3, then the knight comes out with the tempo. So as I said, now there is this rule: to take is a mistake. So basically black and white are trying to keep the tension here in the center of the board. Gukesh continues with bishop to e5. You cannot cover yourself with the move knight to d7, because after here knight to d7, of course, rook takes d7 is immediately a possibility. If you take with the king, we take out the knight. If you take out with the knight, then of course the rook is hanging here on h8. So that's why after bishop to e5, king to e7 was played by Magnus. And it seems strange in some lines that you keep your king in the center of the board, but actually in these types of structures where the queens are off the board, when the game is not so complicated anymore, the king is perfectly fine in the center, because this game could reach slowly but surely to the fully endgame stage, and then it's very, very good to have your king already activated in the center. So good move also here by Magnus. So bishop to c7. Okay, Gukesh gets his pawn back. Magnus develops the piece. Knight to d7, bishop to g3, retreating move here by Gukesh, and now rook to g8. Getting use of the g-file attack. There is now this tension. E takes f3 that we have talked about. Maybe if something clears on the g-file, then also the g2 pawn could be a warnable square. Bishop to e2 by Gukesh. We have king to e8, getting out of the potential attack by the bishop here on d6. We have now f takes e4 by Gukesh. Risky choice, I think, again by Gukesh here, because as we said, to take is a mistake. You're inviting basically your opponent's piece into the game. I think a slightly better continuation would have been to play the game like this. Now, as we said, to take a mistake, if you play e takes f3, then g takes f3, and now I think we get out of this mess here on the g file, and now we can activate our knight. We can occupy maybe the d file, already the e file. So many good opportunities, I think, here for white. Also bishop to f2, hitting maybe this pawn. So in this open tactical battle with the bishop here, I think white should be actually slightly better here. But okay, after move f takes e4, okay, here Magnus gets this knight very, very active into the game. Knight to e4, bishop to f3, knight takes g3, we have h takes g3. Even if you play bishop to b7 here, it's nothing spectacular. Then we play rook to b8, takes, and now again we would reach a similar position like in this line. After h takes g3, it's maybe not the same, but with similar ideas. Now Magnus Carlsen traded off, of course, the bishop here. Bishop takes f3, knight to f3. Here we have rook takes g3, but of course Gukesh can also take out now the pawn on h7, and is threatening to play rook to h8, which can of course be met with knight to f8. But Magnus went out of this attack, played now king to e7. Both moves would have been perfectly fine. Also to play king to f8, pardon me, knight to f8. But so far Magnus is trying to include now this king into the game. So okay, after move king to e7. This is pretty equal position. Both players have now 4 pawns on the board, but the issue is here, of course, this weak pawn, this isolated pawn here by Gukesh. So that's why, first of all, here knight to d4 was played by Gukesh. If you play now rook takes g2, then knight to c6, very dangerous. For instance, in some lines, if you get your king on f6, then this other rook is coming into the game. So Magnus didn't want to risk anything here. He keeps now the position more solid. He is not trying to endanger his king further. So that's why after move knight to d4, he played first knight to e5 himself. He's controlling the c6 square, not allowing dangerous checks by the knight. Still this pawn is hanging, so that's why here Gukesh attacked first the knight. Magnus counterattacks also the knight on d4. We have now rook to e5, rook takes d4, and now finally Gukesh protects now the pawn on g2 with the move rook to e2. And again, okay, this is pretty equal, but the downside is, as I said, simply the g2 pawn. That's the most important thing here to say. If Magnus somehow grabs this pawn on g2, then he would have here two connected pass pawns on the f and e file, which is a great strategic element in chess endgames. If you get that, then it's very hard for the rook to battle against two connected pawns. On the other side, okay, there is this 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the queen side, but it's very, very tough already also for white to create a passer here. Black has already the pass pawn on the e file, so it's a different story. It's an imbalanced, still a very, very dynamic endgame. Although probably if you play this kind of an endgame in perfect shape, then I think you could get a draw for sure, but you have to force here the draw. You have to struggle, you have to battle for your draw, and you know how Magnus Carlsen is playing this kind of an endgames. This is simply the Magnus Carlsen stage of the game, the endgame stage. Really, let's see now what happened. Again, very, very interesting things happen now in this particular endgame. So after move rook to e2, we have rook from a to d8, c3, rook to f4, king to c2, rook to g8. Magnus Carlsen is simply attacking now the pawn on g2. We have b4, and now good move by Magnus, b5. He's controlling now with 2 of his pawns, 3 pawns by Gukesh. He's not allowing here c4 or a4 to happen, so good, nice defensive move here by Magnus on the queen side. We have king to b3, rook to g4, rook to f2. Gukesh is also playing a decent counterattack against his pawn on f7. Good move. We have a rook to g7, rook takes g7, rook takes g7, and I think one problem solved here for Gukesh. Very interesting choice to at least trade off one rook off the board, because now Magnus cannot really create any more this dangerous attacks against his pawn on g2. But we have to again say it, although this is pretty equalish, again white is simply stuck with the rook to defend the pawn on g2. Meanwhile, black's rook can play much more freely, and also black's king can play much more freely, especially when the king gets somewhere here in the center of the board. Then it could be very dangerous also here for white. In the game after rook to g7, a4 by Gukesh, we have f5 by Magnus. He pushes where he has the advantage, of course, here on the king side. A takes b5, a takes b5, and as we said, Magnus' only strength here that he has now already this passer on the e file. And what Gukesh could have played here, and he should have played, is also to create himself immediately the pass pawn with the move c4. It is risky, and this is just a wild stockfish line that you have to see, but this was the only way now for Gukesh to stay in the game somehow. c4 leads probably into a complicated line with this move, rook to g3. Then you have to cover. Very strange idea to give up your pawn here after b takes c4, king to c4. You're giving up a pawn here. After a couple more moves, you're giving up your g2 pawn, but actually after rook to b3, you can get the rook behind, and it's a thematic draw. White can simply push the pawn further here, will activate the king, of course, towards the center of the board, but now after a couple more moves, we simply push the pawn further, and even if the rook gets here on c8, we simply push it further. You can get, of course, your king closer, but now we play a calm move. After something like, I don't know, here, rook to b8, we attack simply now the pawn on f5, so black's king is simply far away from the action. When the pawn is moved here to f4, then we get our king here, and it's, in my opinion, nothing spectacular. This is a draw for sure. You can take, of course, the pawn on b6 will take out this one, and it's a draw. But what Gukesh, instead of this move c4, he played now the move rook to a2, and this wasn't good because Magnus Carlsen can activate his pieces now further. What he could have done in Magnus immediately is to centralize the king, which is an idea that we have already discussed. When you play in an endgame like this, the king has to be really the most active piece. Now after something like rook to a6, we can again activate the king further. You can even attack the pawn on b5, but look at this. After king to e4, you take, and now the issue is here that black's pawns, I think, have made more progress already here. So you see black is already pushing the pawn on the other side of the board. For instance, white can of course get the rook but somehow behind. We push the pawn, you push the pawn too, but the issue is now after a couple more moves you deliver this annoying check with rook to g3, and then rook to f3, you're cutting off here the f file, and this is game over here for white. So even if you get into a race situation here from black's perspective, this should be a completely winning endgame here for you. But okay, here after move rook to a2, Magnus played the other optimal line. He played on the move rook to g5. He tried to connect now the rook to the pawn on b5. For instance, if you play now king to rook to a5, then you play f4, simply protecting your pawn. And now after something like king to c2, you get rook to g2. And again, as I said, this move comes with a direct threat against the king. It's a check, you get another tempo, and now you have this goal that you wanted. You are having here two connected pass pawns, so it's game over again here for white. Very wild stuff. So after move rook to g5, maybe rook to a5 should have been played anyway here by Gukesh, but now he makes another mistake. Rook to a7 activates simply here the king by Magnus Carlsen. Magnus is now getting closer and closer with the king. Now we have rook to a2. Magnus pushes the pawn further. f4, rook to c2, rook to g3 prevents, of course, now this move c4 that we have discussed also previously. So Gukesh never created himself really a pass pawn here. So c4 is impossible now. We have king to a2. Now Magnus again activates the king further. The king is now becoming stronger and stronger in this particular endgame. King to b2, we have king to d5, rook to d2, a check by Gukesh. Of course, Magnus again activates the king. King to b3, now e5. Here Gukesh tried a check. Magnus escapes to f5, but now the last idea here by Gukesh is to play rook to d2, but now e4 by Magnus. Good move, a very stunning move, because of a rook to d5, king to f6 was played, rook to b5. Okay, you got your fun by taking out now the pawn on b5, but now Magnus simply pushed the pawn further, and you cannot get your rook behind. You cannot get the rook behind this pawn, and the king is far away from the action. Even if you get your king, as we said, on c2, always rook takes g2 comes with the check. In the game, we have now rook to d6, rook to b6 here by Gukesh, king to f5, rook to b5, and now after king to e4, again, new activating move here by Magnus Carlsen. So he will eventually get this pawn on g2. He will eventually connect again to passer. So it's simply game over here already for Gukesh. After king e4, Gukesh tried again rook to b8, but now after move e2, in this particular position, Gukesh resigned. So what's the issue? Of course, you can get behind, you can deliver an annoying check, but now after this one, king to d3, even if you start to push your pawns, we will simply get this idea. A rook to e3, getting a rook behind, it's not working here for Gukesh. You have to trade off the rooks. Black's promotion will happen, so it's game over for sure. So what to say? Incredible game again played by Gukesh and Magnus Carlsen. Incredible how Magnus is playing this endgames. He's really pushing you to the limit, and you have seen there was an opportunity for Gukesh that he could have played a draw, but it's really wild. You have to play a brutal, I don't know, 10-15 moves stockfish continuation in order to make a draw against Magnus Carlsen in these types of endgames. Amazing gameplay by Magnus. Now he's of course the top favorite to reach it into the semifinals. He won now his game, the first game with the black pieces. Tomorrow he needs only a draw with the white pieces, which is in my opinion almost a mission impossible now for Gukesh to make something against Magnus Carlsen. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Interesting ideas here we have seen in this amazing chess game for sure. If you want to see more games from this chess event, check out our coverage so far. Here are some links of some games that we have analyzed before, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say? Chess is the best, of course.